I can't see what he's asking from the Russians. Vance keeps saying, oh, everybody's got to give something. Well, I'm not sure what exactly he's asking the Russians to give. He's trying to get Putin to the table, that's for sure. But clearly he wants Ukraine to be willing to stop things exactly where they are without assurances. So, yeah, I do think he's bought Putin's narrative on Ukraine. I'm not saying he's on Putin's bed or that he's pro-Russian necessarily, but he wants Ukraine off the table. He has bigger deals he wants to do with his pal Vladimir Putin.
The United States is suspending its military aid to Ukraine. White House officials call it a pause and say it will last until President Zelensky can demonstrate to Washington that he's committed to peace. The news was revealed in briefings to journalists, so we can't play you any sound of the White House explanation of what's happened yet. But the Vice President, J.D. Vance, spoke to Fox News a few hours ago. He defended his boss, Donald Trump, saying the president is trying to end the war.
Of course, the door is open so long as Zelensky is willing to seriously talk peace. You can't come into the Oval Office or anywhere else and refuse to even discuss the details of a peace deal. Look, this is not going to make anybody happy. The Russians are going to have to give up stuff. The Ukrainians are going to have to give up stuff. You can't come to the Oval Office and say, give us security guarantees. We won't even engage with you about what we're willing to give up. That's been the Ukrainian posture. When that posture changes, as President Trump said, when they're willing to talk peace, I think President Trump will be the first person to pick up the phone.
Vance also dismissed what European leaders were saying about the war.
I honestly don't care what the Europeans say in public. What I care is what they say in private, and what they need to be saying to President Zelensky is this can't go on forever. The bloodshed, the killing, the economic devastation, it's making everyone worse off. The only pathway to, I think, back to peace and prosperity is what the president is trying to accomplish.
Well, the New York Times chief diplomatic correspondent Steven Erlanger joins us on the line now. Good morning.
Good morning.
I mean, we are obviously waking up to that news, the overnight briefing, the aid pause. What does it mean in reality?
Well, in reality, it's a couple things. One is Trump is using the leverage that he has. I expected him to use it later when things got very serious, but he's got so offended by Zelensky, he decided to use it now. And it's serious leverage. It doesn't mean the end of Ukraine in 10 weeks. Ukraine can keep going, but it is a significant blow for particular bits of ammunition and supplies, particularly air defense. And second, it's another indication that the Don insists on everyone bowing the knee and not offending him in person, which is something the Europeans have been quite good at avoiding. And it's quite clear, thirdly, Trump wants this ceasefire immediately. Zelensky and the Europeans say it's dangerous to have a ceasefire immediately without some kind of guarantees against future Russian aggression or Russians breaking the ceasefire. Trump says, I don't care, I trust Vladimir Putin. If you don't, it doesn't matter, I do.
Do you think Trump really does trust Vladimir Putin, or do you think he is just under pressure because he's promised to end this war so quickly that he is pushing everybody in this direction now?
Well, I think he is pushing everyone, there's no question, but I can't see what he's asking from the Russians. Vance keeps saying, oh, everybody's got to give something. Well, I'm not sure what exactly he's asking the Russians to give. He's trying to get Putin to the table, that's for sure, but clearly he wants Ukraine to be willing to stop things exactly where they are without assurances. So, yeah, I do think he's bought Putin's narrative on Ukraine. I'm not saying he's on Putin's bed or that he's pro-Russian necessarily, but he wants Ukraine off the table. He has bigger deals he wants to do with his pal Vladimir Putin, and Ukraine's in the way. And he also, I think, is sincere in saying he would like the bloodshed to stop. But of course, that has costs for a lot of people down the road, not just right away.
And we're hearing that the White House has said that until President Zelensky proves he's committed to peace, this pause will be in place. What do you think that means? What does Zelensky have to do to prove he's committed to peace?
Well, one thing he has to do is bow the knee to Trump and say, oh gosh, I'm sorry, I contradicted you, sir. I don't think the mineral deal is an issue. I think both sides are quite willing to sign it. I don't think this is intended for leverage. And I think Zelensky has to come out to satisfy Trump and say publicly, yes, of course, I'm interested in peace and I'm quite willing to sit down and discuss a ceasefire. I think that's it. Now, I thought Trump would suspend aid down the road when negotiations got difficult and the Ukrainians were saying, we really can't do that. Thank you very much. But he's decided to use it first. It's a big amount of leverage. It is Trump escalating to de-escalate, which is the way he always bargains.
Do you think it was just that meeting in the Oval Office that has caused such personal offence, or do you think that the fact that Zelensky flew straight from Washington to London to meet with those EU leaders and then met the King here, do you think any of that has had a bearing on this decision?
Well, that's a good question, because Trump loves the King and loves Britain, but I think his dislike, even hatred for Zelensky, stems from Trump's first term with this impeachment of Trump. He was not convicted, of course, but the impeachment stemmed from Zelensky's refusal to investigate Hunter Biden for imaginary or maybe not imaginary corruption in Ukraine in return for defensive weapons. And Zelensky refused to do it. This was the so-called perfect phone call that got Trump impeached. So Trump has been angry with Zelensky ever since. And I do think he's bought Putin's view that Zelensky is not a real leader, Ukraine's not a real country, and that it really does belong somehow in the Russian sphere of influence and certainly shouldn't be inside NATO, that Ukraine as it is a threat to world peace. That's Trump's view.
He also, Donald Trump, appeared to turn on EU leaders. He said that they were weak, that they'd been asking for too much from America, and that it was wrong for EU leaders to say that American backstop was necessary in order to secure peace. What's your perception of what's going on there? Because he seemed, Donald Trump, to have reasonably good meetings with Macron and Keir Starmer last week.
It's an old theme with him, to be honest, since the 80s, even before he became a politician. He has been convinced our allies take advantage of us, that we're fools, that they they hunker under our very expensive nuclear umbrella and arms support. Europe's bigger, it's richer, it should take care of its own defense. So that's the first thing. He's always believed that. And secondly, he believes they should spend more on their own defense, which I think he's right about. And thirdly, I think he feels Ukraine is a European issue, and if Europeans care so much about Ukraine, they should take care of it.
So there's nothing has changed the relationship over the course of the last week, because it did seem like the three men, French, UK, American, they did seem to get on quite well. But these remarks will be interpreted here as a change in that.
I think it's a little unfair to the efforts of Starmer and Macron and Costa and others. I mean, they're trying to get the U.S. back on side. They're trying to calm Trump down. It's not always the most pleasant task. It can be humiliating, but I think they are doing it pretty well, and they're doing it the best they can. And it is important that Europe try to come up with a collective response to show to the Americans, one, they're interested, they're engaged, they're very willing to help, they understand Trump's point of view, this is what they're prepared to do, and to do that, they need some American support, and to be very clear about what that is. I think that's where they're moving. So I don't criticize them in this way that, oh, you went up and you failed. I mean, it's a process, and it's not a very fun process, and as I say, it can sometimes with Trump be a little bit humiliating, but I think they're trying to be statesmen and support Ukraine's national interests.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because the narrative here is all about whether or not they have failed or succeeded. Just finally,
that's what we do as journalists. You fail if the world doesn't end tomorrow in happiness. I
Yeah.
mean, I've done that myself. That's what we do.
I wouldn't mind if people were doing a bit of that, but they're doing the opposite in this country, Stephen. They're saying it's a triumph. We're getting these trumpet clarion calls of triumph about what's gone on.
Well, everybody spins terribly. I mean, there are very few, as you know, triumphs in the world.
Finally, before we let you go, we're expecting another big speech, another address from Donald Trump. It will come tomorrow for us, but today for you guys. What are we expecting in that?
I'm not sure. I think, he's done the big tariff thing and he's done the Ukraine thing. I suspect a lot of it will be domestic, about what a wonderful job he and his buddy, his munchkin, Elon Musk, are doing to kind of get rid of America's civil service. I'm not really sure, to be honest.
Well, we will watch that and we will have all of the latest on the programme tomorrow after we've heard it. Steven Erlanger, really appreciate your time. Great to get your thoughts on all of that this morning.
Thanks.
It was so interesting from Stephen. As you were having that